Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Indy's Trusted Servant Show on InspireSmall.biz/Indy's Trusted Servant. I want to thank Ryan Henry, the host of Indy's Trusted Servant show, which you can pick up every Monday on the website at 3 o'clock. What is Indy's Trusted Servant? Well, that's me. I'm Danny O'Malia, Indy's Trusted Servant. I do customer service training and keynote speaking about customer service. It's really about the culture of the organization. I learned all of that from the hand of the master, my late father, Joel O'Malia, back in the O'Malia food market days, and even before that at the age of 9 when he owned a small grocery store in Broad Ripple that ultimately failed 10 years before he came back and started O'Malia's. One thing he taught me was to never give up. That was one of my early lessons. What's the Indy's Trusted Servant show on InspireSmall.biz? I like to describe it as lively local small biz and community talk where you can feel the pulse of Indy. And today I'm really excited to bring a very good friend of mine to the Indy's Trusted Servant show, Dr. Matt Will of the University of Indianapolis. I like to describe him as Indy's Economist. He's also a fellow Rotarian and a fellow member of the Cathedral High School Board of Directors. And I'm proud to say I brought him onto the Board of Directors some time back. And we're going to talk about the economy today. Dr. Matt Will, welcome to the show.
Well, Danny, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here. And, you know, when people say you're Indy's trusted servant, it's true. I mean, I had Danny come to my school once and talk to my students about customer service. And to this day, the alumni of that event still are talking about your presentation.
That's good to know. And Matt's had me on a group of people that work with the business students at the University of Indianapolis, and they do some very, very good things, including an annual event where the kids come and he brings his friends from Rotary and the business world, and it's a networking event, and the kids have their own business cards and everything. It's a very cool event, and it really introduces the kids to the real world. But we're here to talk about the economy, right? Mm-hmm. And, I guess the timing is just perfect to turn Matt Will loose and talk about the economy and the state of the nation and the world and Indiana. So let's start with, what's your outlook for the economy in the near future? We know where it is now.
That's probably the number one question I get is, what's my outlook? What's my forecast of the future? And probably the first answer I always give is, I can't predict the future. I think economists, and people call me an economist, but the reality is I'm what's called a financial economist. There's two types of economists out there. There's the theoretical ones, the ones that teach microeconomics and macroeconomics, and they're very textbook oriented. And then there's the financial economists. That's what I am. They're the ones who tend to work on Wall Street, who tend to work in corporate environments, who really are in the real world. So, it's funny because, you have 5 or 6 economists make a prediction and they'll give you 20 predictions, and none of them are right. So
you can tell that by watching the news, right?
Exactly. So I don't predict, but people misinterpret. I can tell you cause and effect. Okay, I can tell you that when a certain policy is implemented, what's the effect going to be? So when you say, Danny, what's the outlook? Unfortunately, it's not good, because if you look at the current data, just the data of what's going on, we see that there's probably a recession coming. In fact, we might already be in a recession. And we know that because, of course, the first quarter of this year was a downturn. We saw the economy dip. And everything that's happening now by the Fed, by the federal government, those policies are policies that tend to create recessions. So we may already be in that place right now. And unfortunately, that's just a reality. But there's a lot of other outlooks, and I don't know if you want to get into some of them, but recession, it's probably, if not already here, soon to arrive.
How long again, I'm asking you to do something you can't do, but if we are in recession or we're going into recession, how long do you think it will last? And what would stop it?
Okay, the second question I think is more relevant, because while I don't know how long it's going to be, I can definitely tell you what would keep it from going longer. Okay, and the Fed actually did the right thing. So I realize that this was going to air at a later date, but as we're talking here, the Fed recently did a 0.75% rate increase. That was a really good thing. People are all upset, saying, "Oh no, my interest rate's going to go up. My mortgage is going to be higher." But the thing is, they did the right thing finally. I mean, we've been talking about this inflation since early last year. It was supposedly transitory, and I remember doing a lot of interviews at the time saying,
yeah.
There's nothing transitory about it.
No.
And again, it's not because I was predicting the future. It's because simply looking at the facts of how the government was spending money, how the Federal Reserve Board was behaving, and we can get into that a little bit. The reality is the inflation was here, and it was coming fast and furious, and everybody that knew how to analyze data knew this was occurring. So fast forward to now, and finally they're doing the right thing. The Fed increased interest rates for the first time in May of this year. They should have done it May of last year, but they did it May of this year. And then in June, they increased it by 0.75% when everybody was expecting 0.5%. So kudos to the Federal Reserve for doing the right thing.
Finally.
Finally. Yeah. Now, if they continue to do the right thing, the answer to your question is the recession would be short-lived. But if they pull back and they come under pressure from politicians to reverse course, then we're in trouble again. And there's reasons why the politicians, are going to pressure them to reverse course because, of course, we have an election coming up. But we can talk about where inflation comes from because I think people really don't fully understand it because politicians like to make it complicated.
Let's go there. Where's inflation? Where does this inflation come from?
Well, you know what? All inflation comes from the same place. It's very simple. So there's only two parts. It's cash and stuff. That's it. There's nothing more to the equation than that. If you have more cash and you don't have more stuff, you have inflation. If someone
supply and demand.
It's all it is, Danny.
Yep.
If someone comes to buy your house and they have boatloads of cash, price of your house is going up. But if that one person, because there's only one person to buy your house, doesn't have as much cash, then you can't charge more because they just don't have the money. Well, where does the cash come from? The cash comes from government. Only the government can print money. Now, let me be very specific. Federal government. The federal government they're the only ones that can print money. State government can't do it. Local government can't do it. Only federal government. So the federal government prints money. And when I say print money, I literally mean print money.
Whether there's anything to back it up or not.
That ship has sailed back in the 70s. So I don't know if we want to get into that discussion. But the reality is they can print money. And the Federal Reserve Board, Jerome Powell, he's the guy. They print money and then they buy assets from the economy and they just put them in the drawer, they hide them, and then they send this cash out to the world. So that's the cash part. But you know what? There's no inflation if we have more stuff. If companies are producing product. Because if there's more homes to buy, well, then if there's more cash, that's perfectly fine. Then there's no inflation. So the government can print more money, but we, Danny, private industry produces more stuff. So
they both have to happen.
They both have to happen at the same rate.
Same time.
And it's as simple as that. And
so beyond the Federal Reserve, what else could happen to help stem the tide of this inflation?
Well, less spending.
Yes.
Because again, like I said, only the federal government can print money. So the federal government prints money and then spends it. It's called monetizing the debt. So a lot of, like last year, President Biden passed this, almost $2 trillion spending package for COVID relief. Well, that just sent all this cash into the economy because, of course, it was deficit spending. And the consequence has been inflation. In fact, I saw some very liberal economists the other day on television commentating. And they said, you know what? These are left-leaning economists who said at least 3% of the inflation, we're having is caused by the federal government spending that was passed last year. So when you see the extreme economists saying that the federal government spending was 3%, it's got to be more. And when I saw Janet Yellen testify before Congress, and she said, no, that spending had almost nothing to do with that. That was very disingenuous. It was very political, and it really hurt her credibility to say something that's just factually wrong. And unfortunately, the inflation is, caused by government, but government likes to spend. They like to buy votes.
They like to buy votes. Yep.
And so I don't anticipate the federal spending to stop inflation because I think they're going to keep spending.
So what else do we do?
Well, we need more stuff.
And then we have this supply chain difficulty.
Which is also government imposed because a lot of this is not just our government, but governments around the world are slowing trade. China shuts down their economy, so we get so much of our goods from China. So there's less stuff from China. President Biden said that, oh, we're going to open up the ports. People may know, like in Los Angeles, there was back in October, November, over 100 ships that were at sea.
Are they still out there?
Yes, not 100 though.
But yeah, okay.
It's between 40 and 60. I didn't check the numbers this week. But yeah, they're still there. Now the reason, President Biden said the port's going to be open 24/7. Well, I was there in November at the Long Beach port. I actually went there. And I can tell you, when I was talking to the driver that I was talking to the people working there, it's not open 24/7. It's open 4 days a week and only part of the day. And there's a little bit of activity in the other days, but very little. In fact, I have videos and photographs of the weekend showing no activity and all these ships out there. Now, there's a reason for that. The reason is the Longshoremen's Union. And the reason is the regulations in California. California has laws that actually say you cannot bring in a lot of carbon-created vehicles to pick up containers unless you also have more environmentally friendly vehicles. So if you don't have enough environmentally friendly vehicles,
which they don't,
yeah, you can't pick them up. There's laws regarding transporting of containers to warehouses in the state of California. Now, many of these laws are recent, so you would think they would have delayed them or removed them, but no, they let them go into place, which made matters worse. And so this whole supply chain problem is preventing stuff. And then we have more stuff problems because of regulations. Of course, this administration is very high into regulating businesses. Well, that also reduces the business's ability to produce stuff. And
exactly, including oil,
and including baby formula.
Yes.
Yes. People may not realize that the baby formula shortage that we have in this country is government imposed. Now, I know people can say, oh no, that's an extreme opinion. Oh no, you can go to NPR. NPR had a really good article this last week on it, and they spoke about this, that in February, 4 babies got ill from a formula that produces about 40% of the formula in the United States. By the way, there's a problem right there in that the government has allowed a concentration in this industry. Corporations and businesses often work together to prevent competition. It's not as if businesses are great. Some businesses are very, what I call corporate, crony capitalism.
Oh God, yes.
They're against competition. So the government in February imposed a shutdown in the largest manufacturer and facility in the country of baby formula because 4 babies got sick. Now, millions, tens of millions of babies get formula.
And the government did nothing to help them open that plant.
Nothing. And by the way, we don't know what caused those 4. But so some government official said, well, I'm not going to take the risk. So they shut down the factory in February. Well, fast forward a few months, now we don't have enough baby formula. And then the same companies, they're the ones who lobbied for trade restrictions so we couldn't import formula. So formula is a domestic product. We don't import it until this emergency measure that came into place. And so, the government causes the problem. And then, of course, President Biden says, I'll solve the problem. So the government's going to solve the problem they created by mandating the War Powers Act, which says that they can force companies to switch over to baby formula manufacturing. But Danny, how long do you think it takes that to happen?
It takes a while.
Yeah.
It takes a while.
They're not
you got to
producing
retrofit
formula.
your factory and so on and so forth.
Exactly.
You got to hire new people, and then you can't find the people, and so on and so forth.
And then it gets even worse. I don't know how complicated or detailed you want to get into this.
That's part of the problem is the whole thing is too complicated for sound bites, right?
It is.
But go ahead.
Well, I'll try to make it brief, but half of the baby formula in the country is purchased through the Women, Infant, and Children program by the government. The government gets a lower price. So guess what happens when the government, strong arms industry into forcing them to pay a lower price?
They got to charge us more.
Well, there's a shortage.
And there's a shortage.
Yeah, they have to charge everyone else more, and there's a shortage. When prices are forced to be artificially low, like back in the early 70s when the government tried to regulate gas prices, you have shortages. You have lines.
If you're not old enough to remember, you used to could only buy gas every other day depending on your license plate number.
Yeah.
And the lines were enormous, right?
Because government thought they were helping us.
Yes,
by
they did.
telling us they would regulate the price and keep it down.
Mm-hmm.
Price controls only limit supply, and the government WIC program, which is meant to be a good thing, actually caused the shortage. So government caused the shortage of stuff.
The road to hell is paved with good intentions sometimes.
Yeah.
So one of the things people are talking about here in Indiana is what if they could just temporarily eliminate the gas tax? Is that possibility?
It's a possibility, but I don't think it's going to happen for a few reasons. One's legitimate, ones are not legitimate. First of all, the governor makes a good point when he says that he doesn't have the authority to suspend it. He doesn't. However, he's done a lot of things during the pandemic that he didn't have the authority to do. So that's really a political thing, because this governor is very different than, let's say, Governor Daniels. Governor Daniels, even though they were supposedly friends and they worked together, Governor Daniels was all about shrinking the size of government.
Yes.
Governor Holcomb really uses government to expand and be more helpful in your life. He wants to be generous and kind, but it's harmful to the economy for government to grow. And so I believe he's using this as an excuse, saying, well, I don't have the authority to do it, because he really doesn't want to shrink government. He's been a politician who's liked to grow government. And so we see him doing that in this case. But they could do it. And they should do it.
They should do it.
In fact, it should be permanent.
How, on a gallon of gas, if they eliminated the Indiana state gas tax, how much would that save everybody? Do you know?
Yeah, 56 cents.
56 cents.
Yeah.
That's huge.
And
that's huge.
We're one of the few states in the country that has 3 taxes. We have federal tax, we have a sales tax, and we have a gas tax. And our gas tax is going up by a penny per gallon in July. It went up about 10 cents a year or so ago. And the 7% is based on the overall price. So we've gone up 60% in Indiana, 60% increase in 2 years in our gas
taxes. What would happen to the state if, the state's income, if they just temporarily, till this is over, got rid of the gas tax?
Oh, we have a surplus.
I know we do.
It would be meaningless.
Yeah.
And in fact, it shouldn't be temporary. It should be a permanent elimination.
Well, I agree, but temporary is the best we can ask for.
Because that's going to produce more stuff.
Yeah.
I heard a silly comment. Someone asked me the other day. They said, well, I heard some economists saying that if the state government gives you a refund or cuts the gas tax, it'll cause inflation. And I said, that's just nonsense. And you go back to your basic econ book from high school, and it'll tell you the state government can't print money. The federal government can print money, but the state government cannot. It's like, Danny, if I said, I'm the state government, and I said, Danny, I'm going to tax you $1 out of your right pocket, and then next week I'm going to put it back in your left pocket. That can't cause inflation. It's just nonsensical. But someone said people are saying that, and it doesn't make it. But it's people who don't want government to shrink.
Yeah. Now back to the point of the $2 trillion bail.
Yes.
It actually. So we all got a check, but we're all paying a lot more for our stuff and our taxes and everything else, right?
Yeah. This is a historical phenomenon. So if you study economic history, countries historically like to buy votes. Even if you're you're a monarch or a dictator, you still like to buy the goodwill of your people. So you give them stuff. See, the government can print money and give you stuff, and you think, oh, I like the government, they gave me stuff. But in doing
my Obama phone.
Yeah.
My Obama
or
phone.
the Biden vaccine tests that we all get for free now. Mm-hmm. So you get those things, and you think, oh, the government's so nice. But then when prices go up, the government can blame business, because the government caused the inflation, but indirectly. And so they can blame business, even though they know business didn't cause it. And we see right now, the government is saying, evil businesses, we're going to have hearings into these price increases.
Well, that's an interesting point. Let's back to the gas and oil industry. They're blaming the oil industry, but what happened to the oil industry in 2020?
Well, in the United States, for example, I think within the first day of President Biden taking office, he rescinded the issuing of leases on public land to retrieve oil.
Right.
Because most oil is retrieved from public lands. Now, people think there's these big smokestack and drilling rigs. No, it's a very clean process. You can hardly see it because the way they drill.
Much cleaner than Venezuela.
Oh, well, yes. But so they've simply not renewed. They've slowed things down. So our domestic production has just really plummeted. And, and we haven't built a new refinery since 1973.
Yeah, and on top of that, everybody quit driving in 2020 for a long, long time, and it probably hasn't returned totally. And so they lost money back then, right? And to blame them now seems to be crazy.
It's supply and demand. There's no magic. There's no conspiracy. There's simply more cash. And like I said, government likes to blame cost increases on business when in fact they're the ones that caused it.
Exactly. So in the few minutes we have remaining, we've talked about the gas tax in Indiana, which is probably the only thing the state of Indiana can do right now to help us.
Yeah.
Right? What could the federal government do to help us?
Well,
not that they will do it, but what could they do?
Well,
you mentioned the drilling and all of that.
Yeah. Well, let's differentiate between the Federal Reserve Board
and the government
and the federal government. White House and Congress. The Federal Reserve Board is now doing the right thing. Finally, in fact, starting in May for interest rates and starting in June for what we call, the reverse of quantitative easing. They started that in the month of June. So those two things are good. They're doing their job. Keep it up. The federal government, though, could really do a lot of things, which is reduce spending. Okay. And in fact, unfortunately, you hear Congress and the president talk about, oh no, we're going to help people by giving them more money. Of course, they're thinking they're going to, well, I don't know what they think, but that will cause it to make the problem worse.
Exactly. Here's another example. Maybe not directly related to the inflation. Maybe it is. Let's talk about the student loan debt thing, okay? Is it true, I think it is, that if they eliminate student loan debt over here, somebody else has to pay for it, right?
Well, I mean, it's paid for by the general population.
Exactly. And so we're getting, if they eliminate student loan debt, then we're getting taxed even more. Right?
Well,
people don't understand that.
You're taxed one of two ways, either increased taxes or inflation. Inflation is a tax created by government.
Yep.
But it's indirect. They can do it, but you don't really see it, and you don't think if they can persuade you that it's not their fault. So yeah, we just said it, Danny. They're doing the same thing. They're buying your vote by spending.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the inflation occurs, which is how we pay for that, they blame it on someone else.
Everybody else, from Putin to the meat industry to the oil industry to whatever. Right? This
is history. I mean, even Putin. The war didn't start until after inflation has been here for 12 months.
Correct.
So I saw an estimate. And I kind of concur. Maybe the war has caused about a 0.3 or 0.4% change in the inflation rate.
Minuscule.
Yeah, it's there, but it's nothing compared to what happened for the past year.
You know what? What do you want to say? What's going on at U of I with your business students and so on and so forth? What's new there? What's some of the strengths at U of I?
Yeah, University of Indianapolis School of Business is really unique in that we have our bachelor's program and our MBA, which is really an amazing MBA. They both have this approach called applied learning. Now, many schools say they do, but they don't really implement it. And I'll tell you how we implement it. So for incoming freshmen, for example, you have to take the traditional classes, finance, marketing, operations. Everybody takes the same courses, same books, same syllabus everywhere in the country you go. But our freshmen also are required to have a business card freshman year.
There you go.
They have to have a resume on file with our placement office freshman year. We require them to go to 2 networking events. Of course, you've been to some of these networking events in the past.
Yeah.
Because we believe there's something very important about learning business. It's what you know and it's who you know.
Amen. Amen.
And schools don't cover that part.
They don't.
So we insist on it. It's not even optional. It's required. And then in our courses, while we use the same books and syllabus other schools use, we also do something unique. Is at the upper level courses, you get a book, a syllabus, and a client.
Okay.
So when you're a junior or a senior and you're taking a course in, let's say, market research, you learn market research and then you have a client and you implement market research and you do it for them in the real world.
In the real world, a real business, a real live business.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So, and do they get credit for that?
Yeah, it's part of the class.
It's part of the class. Okay.
So that's where the class deviates from other ones. In fact, when pandemic hit, it's kind of really put a wrench in the works. But pre-pandemic, we had 519 students in 2019 who did applied projects for businesses.
So how many kids are in the business school?
We have 900 plus students in the School of Business.
Out of how many total undergrads?
I think the undergrad population at UIndy is around 3,500.
So a fourth of the kids are in business.
That's grad and undergrad combined.
Okay.
So the university has about 5,500 students, about 900 School of Business.
Okay.
So
That's a great percentage. Has
it's
that
a
been
high
growing?
As a percentage, yes. I mean, School of Business has been growing. We will probably see a record-setting freshman class this year.
What do you attribute that to?
Well, that's a good question because not everybody is growing. And we have a very unique recruiting effort. I talked about applied business. The people who recruit our undergraduate business students are business students. Most schools have recruiter. In fact, every school has a recruiter, admissions office. We do too. But when we go to a conference, let's say in Dallas in May, we sent not our recruiting department at the university, we sent 2 students.
Okay.
They went to this conference. They were there with a booth.
Awesome.
They were the ones selling to high school students. And if you're a high school student looking to go to college, who are you going to respond to better? Some old guy like you and I, or some fellow 18, 19-year-old?
Yeah. Well, and you're giving them real world experience, which is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So Dr. Matt Will, University of Indianapolis. I like to call him Indianapolis' Economist. Thanks for being here today.
My pleasure.
It's great to see you. And next week, we'll have another Rotarian on our show, Tim Nation, at the Peace Center out at Eagle Creek Park. And that's going to be a very, very interesting show. By the way, you want to tell your viewers how to access U of I for admissions or whatever?
Yeah. I mean, if you want to go to the University of Indianapolis School of Business, go to welcome.undbiz.com, and you'll see the website created by my students.
There you go.
And if you want to contact me, my Twitter account is @drmattwill.
@drmattwill. Dr. Matt Will, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
We'll see you all next week with Tim Nation of the Peace Center.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Indy's Trusted Servant Show. If you liked this episode, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more updates. The Indy's Trusted Servant Show is produced by InspireSmall.biz in Indianapolis, Indiana. For more episodes of the Indy's Trusted Servant Show, visit www.inspiresmall.biz/Indy's Trusted Servant. Thanks for watching.